Good morning, my beautiful friends. Today is Friday, December the 4th, and this is the 26th edition of Book Fun Friday. Welcome. So, the young adult book I'm going to be talking to y'all about today is titled Dancing at the Pity Party, a dead mom graphic memoir, and it's written by Tyler Fetter. So let me tell a little bit about this book. It's no spoiler, obviously. It's right there in the title. But this book it's a true account. Remember, it's a memoir. It's a true account of the author's experience with the death of her mother. The chronology of the story is her mom's diagnosis, her mom's treatment, and then the passing of her mom and the subsequent events that follow that, and how she, the author, navigates that. And I recognize it's a bit of a morose story, but I have to say, as I was reading this book, I felt so many parts of it so hard. At the end of this month, I will be marking the 25th year since the passing of my father, and while it's a sad shared experience to have that kind of loss for myself and for the author, it was also comforting to read her story. There were so many times as I was reading that I thought, yep, I remember feeling that, or absolutely I had that experience, or yes, I completely understand where she's coming from. And so it was comforting to share that experience. It's like having a community of just automatically shared understanding when we all have this thing in common. And she does a beautiful job telling that story and making you, the reader, feel that connection to her, despite the fact that it's such a sad connection. So I'm going to read a passage like I always do. Now, this is a graphic book. I don't know what's happened to me, y'all. I have just fallen in love with graphic books. But there's a lot of narrative in here that I can read as well. The passage I'm going to share here is the morning of her mom's service. They arrive at the funeral home, she and her family, and she describes what that was like in this section. It was so real. My mom's casket was shiny and surprisingly grand, propped up in front of the room with a small pile of peach-colored roses draped on top. My whole life, my dad almost exclusively called my mom Peach. He always said that the nickname came from her peaches and cream complexion, but I secretly wondered if he got it from the pale layer of peach fuzz on her cheeks that I loved, and she would be so mad that I'm mentioning here. The rest of the room was filled with cushioned chairs, not unlike a synagogue or church, but the first row was made up of worn, velvety couches dotted with tissue boxes. Early morning sunlight was streaming through the small square windows, so you could see tiny particles of dust lazily floating through the air. It was a little stuffy and formal, but mostly comfortable and peaceful. A room that would look just right with a cat snoozing in a patch of warmth on the carpet. The peace didn't last long, though, because the guests were starting to arrive. We've always had a big family, but I was flabbergasted by the number of people who showed up. Lots of family, yes, but also old friends and new friends and parents of people I hadn't seen in years. There were so many people. They had to set up a second satellite room with a closed-circuit TV broadcasting the service from across the hall. It made me feel proud of my quiet mom. I'd like to think she was able to know somehow how many lives she had touched. Before the service began, there was what felt like days, but was probably really an hour or so, of standing in a receiving line. All of us ribbon wearers stood at the front of the chapel and received our guests. I need to pause here for a quick second and explain the part about ribbon wearers. Um, so this family is Jewish, and she explains here the tradition of wearing a black ribbon is part of the Jewish tradition. Fun fact: this I'm reading her words. In Jewish bereavement tradition, the primary mourners tear a piece of clothing they wear closest to their heart. It's called kriya, a visual representation of the pain and anger of their loss. A popular modern version of kriya is to tear a black ribbon and pin it to your chest instead. That way you don't ruin all your clothes. And so she and all of her family are wearing these black ribbons. So when she makes that reference there about all the ribbon wearers are standing at the front receiving their guests, that's what that means. As a socially anxious person, it was like a full-blown obstacle course, this receiving line. Everyone seemed to be processing their grief at me. There were the people who grabbed my arms tightly and gave me such powerful eye contact that I felt their eyes were burning a hole in my brain. There were lots of hugs from near strangers with varying amounts of force, wetness, and odor. There were awkward comments about my appearance, but the hardest question was, "How are you?" There was no answer that sounded right. If I said, "Fine, thanks," that felt off, too fake polite for the situation. If I said, "Good," that sounded callous, and it was a lie anyway. If I said, "I'm obviously very bad," that probably would freak everyone out. Eventually, I settled on something nice and vague and said, "I'm doing okay." Some people gave me their opinions about the meaning of all this, or why all the good ones die young, or how God never gives us more than we can handle. I knew their hearts were in the right place, but it only made me more confused and sad. My favorite interactions were when people told me how much they loved my mom. Those were easy. Finally, the rabbi put an end to the receiving line, which by now was stretching into the lobby. "I know you all want to pay your respects," he said, "but we ask that you take your seats and continue at the Shiva." We smushed onto one of the couches and braced ourselves. I was shaking a little bit, and I couldn't tell if it was from the receiving line or in anticipation of what was to come. We squeezed each other's hands, wanting to soak in all the love and warmth we could. We recited the Mourner's Kaddish, a prayer I've said 1,000,000 times since I started Hebrew school at 7 years old. But this time, I was the mourner. Then the eulogies, which by now have faded to highlights. Aunt Marcia, who is 5 years older than my mom, talked about feeling like everything was out of order. Uncle Art joked about my mom burning a pot of boiling water for pasta when she was younger. I laughed and sighed along with everyone, fighting the growing lump in my throat until I couldn't anymore. It was the second time I had cried like this in front of people outside my family, but this time it felt much safer. I didn't write or say anything myself. How could I possibly sum up everything I felt about my mom in a 3-minute eulogy? Giving a speech at my mom's funeral in front of my entire family would have been the terrible icing on a horrible cake. I hope my mom understands. And again, this is titled Dancing at the Pity Party, a Dead Mom Graphic Memoir, and it's written by Tyler Fetter. Well, guys, thanks as always for watching. I do appreciate you. I hope you have a safe and happy weekend. I'll be back next Friday. Next Friday, I'm going to be talking about the book Little and Lion by Brandy Colbert. So I will see you then. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. Bye.